How's it going, guys? I'm going to... Okay, scratch that. Pleb, edit that one out. I want to say, how's it going, guys? Cdew here, but I feel like it's such a meme, so I don't actually know how to introduce myself on YouTube anymore. Yo, Pleb, C, cut that one. How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be discussing with you the 8.1 Resto Shaman changes. This is going to be a PvP only guide, so if you guys are trying to, find some stuff out for PvP, I'm not really going to be covering any of that. So for those of you who are interested in PvP, there's going to be a lot of questions you guys are asking for the new trades, for the new talents, and from the small amount of testing I did, I'm going to give you guys my opinion. There's a lot of other shamans that are playing the game differently. I'm going to try and give you my opinion of, all the specs, but I'm definitely going to, voice which one I think is best. So what I'm going to go over today is races, the talents and honor talents that I use, my macros that I think are important, my stat priority, because in this expansion, stats actually matter. The healing spells, kind of like, what your arsenal is, how to use spells efficiently. I'm going to be talking about, the oh shit buttons that you want to press, or the moments that you come out of a CC, what globals are going to be your best globals, which ones are going to be the most effective. I'm going to talk a little bit about cooldown management, how to deal with double melee if you're being trained, maybe if they're training your DPS, how to deal with casters if they're trying to, harass you with CC. I want to talk about your utility as a Resto Shaman, and I would like to talk about your role as a Resto Shaman. And at the end, I'm going to try and maybe give you guys some ideas of comps that I think are good for Resto Shaman, comps that I played, and comps that I've seen be played. So let's just go ahead and get started here. This is no surprise. It's been years and years and years and years, and the best race for Resto Shaman, in my opinion, still is. It always has been, and it seems that it always will be Orc. It's just... It's too good. Resto Shamans are kind of notorious for being trained. They're kind of notorious for being able to get, 100 zeroed, killed in stuns. The stun reduction that Orc provides has just been so good for so long, 20% reduced. It's irreplaceable. The value is so immense that I don't think that there's any race better than it. If you're on the Alliance side, obviously you don't have Orc as an option, so I'm going to go ahead and say that I think Dark Iron Dwarf is the best. If you go head-to-head Dark Iron Dwarf versus regular Dwarf, not every single game the regular dwarf racial is going to be valuable, because you can remove the diseases, poisons, bleeds, which isn't always going to do something if you're not facing that. And then the 10% physical damage reduction might not actually help you, as opposed to the Dark Iron Dwarf, where you can actually use the Dark Iron Dwarf racial as almost like an on-use trinket. You're going to get the 600 intellect, so even if you're being trained by physical damage, you at least get some value out of having more intellect. Or if you're not getting trained at all, you can get more value out of having the intellect to heal your partners. So let's go ahead and go over the talents and honor talents. One of the tricky tiers is actually the first one right off the bat. A lot of people are confused on Torrent, Undulation, and Unleash. Originally, at the start of the expansion, I really liked Unleash, but it felt weaker than Torrent. Since then, Riptide has been nerfed, and I think Unleash has taken that spot since then. Just a quick little test here. Healing Surge heals 4. That's a crit. Let's go ahead and cut that. Edit that one out, Plebsy. No, I'm just kidding. 19k. Healing Surge heals for 19k. Unleash heals for 17k. It is essentially almost an instant cast heal. Like, it's almost as powerful as casting a healing surge or casting a healing wave. It's fantastic. There's a lot of flexibility with the spell. You can use a casted heal after it. You can use a Riptide after it, buffing the initial heal of the Riptide as well as the hot, which is really, really good. In 3v3 arena, if you're fighting against like a Roddy comp and your main target that you're healing has Earth Shield and you're pouring all the healing into him, if you just dump an Unleash Riptide onto your, your quote-unquote off target to give him a little bit extra healing, so you can kind of take a break from healing for a little bit, it's so powerful. So Unleash has all the flexibility. It doesn't cost too much mana. It's a great instant heal, which Shamans are actually lacking in this patch, and it just has more flexibility than Torrent and Undulation. So definitely the best talent in my opinion. So I would recommend it. If you guys aren't used to it, definitely get used to it. It's for sure the play there. Now this is another controversial topic in my opinion. Since the change with Rippling Waters being removed in 8.1 and having the one charge of Riptide, having one charge of Riptide as opposed to two feels really awkward, and I've definitely questioned it where, I ask myself, should I be playing Echo? And the sample size that I have, it feels like Earth Shield is healing for way too much. Every game that I played without Earth Shield, it just feels like I'm missing out on too much healing. The target I'm healing just is not sustaining enough. So Earth Shield, from what I've seen, Just feels too powerful. I thought originally coming into this patch that single target comps I would use Earth Shield, and those Roddy comps I would use Echo. But I think the main reason that Echo even felt good last patch was in combination with Rippling Waters. You were getting so much more value out of the healing from Rippling Waters than you were from having the extra charge of the Riptide. So it just doesn't feel as good. And Healing Stream, not quite as strong as it used to be in the previous expansions. So let's just go over a couple of my logs here. Earth Shield 8.5%. That's obviously not a real thing. Earth Shield 14.7%. Keep in mind, it's doing this much healing, and on top of that, it's increasing my healing by 10%. So it's just all around 7.2%, all around just a solid ability. I would not really recommend speccing out of it. You can try to spec out of it if you feel like you're really, really struggling with Rot and you feel like you don't really need that single target healing. Maybe if you're still using Surging Tides. And then we'll touch on Deluge a little bit here. I personally think this is terrible. I think all the chain heal stuff that's been going on is kind of a meme. I'm not a big fan of the chain heal spec. I'll talk about it in a little bit. Obviously, if you play Deluge and you play High Tide and you play Tidebringer and you play Spirit Link and then you Unleash, you're going to have the biggest chain heals of all time, but then you miss out on Earth Shield, you miss out on Ascendance, you miss out on Spirit Link Totem. It's just... Maybe in RBGs it could be good, but that's something that I don't really do. So moving on to the third tier, the level 45 talent tier, let's just go ahead and scratch this one right off the list. Static Charge is something I've never used. I said I wouldn't talk about PvE, but I've done it in Mythic Plus and it felt okay. But it's just not value enough. You know, you already have the ability capacitor totem. If it was a 5-second stun, maybe I would debate on using it for the reduced cooldown, but it just doesn't seem strong enough. So Static Charge is a no-go. Earth Grab is kind of my main go. I like Earth Grab versus almost any team. It's even good versus casters, just try and lock people in position. And then Spirit Wolf, I generally try and use if I feel like I'm not going to get a lot of value out of the root, or if I'm getting trained by melee where it doesn't feel like the root's doing anything. For example, Earth Grab is really powerful against Death Knights because they can't break the roots. It's really powerful against Demon Hunters, but against something like Warriors where they have Blade Storm, or Rogues where they have Cloak and they have Vanish, it's not as powerful. So if those classes are training you, you could definitely try and use Spirit Wolf in combination with Spectral Recovery, in combination with the Pack Spirit, even though it was recently nerfed. It's so good. I'll touch on that in a little bit. Moving on to the fourth tier, you know, there's only one ability you see here. It's Earthen Wall Totem. Ancestral Protection Totem. You might see a video every once in a while where someone reses, you know, 5-minute cooldown, chance to do nothing, Ancestral Vigor. If it procced from your Riptide Hot and lasted longer, I think that this would be a real talent. So in previous expansions, your Riptide re-healing just with the Hot actually increased your HP by a percentage. That would actually be really good for swaps. It would have great synergy with Nature's Guardian, but it doesn't feel strong enough with a 10-second duration. And Earthen Wall Totems even, it's just so good. Even though it got nerfed by 30%, it's still really powerful. You were essentially unkillable with Earthen Wall down before. Now the nerf makes it so you can die through. It's no big deal. It's still really powerful. Moving on to the 75 talent tier, Windrush Totem, never going to be good. It's 2-minute cooldown, terrible. It's a 10-yard range, terrible. And it doesn't even make you immune to movement and parrying effects, terrible. It's a PvE talent. Absolutely garbanzo beans, as Venruki would say. If you ever spec into it, everyone will LUL at you in the chat. So Nature's Guardian is going to be your go-to here. It's super good for surviving those situations where people are trying to kill you 100-0 because it procs while you're in the stun. I'm really happy it's back. The only problem I have with this talent is you don't actually know whether you have the CD or not, unless there's some weak R or something. So Nature's Guardian going to be the go-to. Graceful Spirit was the talent that you used in PvE, but now with the Ancestral Gift honor talent that Blizzard put in place, there's actually a really interesting synergy where you can reduce the cooldown of your Spirit Walker's Grace to 1 minute. So instead of a 2-minute Arm Mastery cooldown, you have that 1-minute Arm Mastery cooldown. I've been using this versus certain comps where I feel like Nature's Guardian's not going to get me much value, where teams aren't trying to really kill me 100-0. Against Boomkin teams, you have an Arm Mastery for every single root beam. If you can, you know, kind of anticipate the root beam, you could press the Arm Mastery with Graceful Spirit and Ancestral Gift, and you can dispel your own root, which allows you to get out of every single root beam, essentially. And then if you're fighting against a Rogue Mage and they're just training your DPS, you could try and use it. It's kind of risky, though, because a Rogue Mage could always 100-0 you. If I was playing against a Turbo or something, for example, and I'm not really the targeted choice, once again, the 1-minute Arm Mastery cooldown is going to be really, really good. So Moving on to the 90 tier, Cloudburst Totem has been something that I just haven't had a lot of respect for in this expansion. If it didn't replace Healing Stream, I think that it would go a much longer way, but for some reason this expansion replaces Healing Stream Totem, which means, in my opinion, it's already infinitely worse than it used to be. Downpour is actually a really solid ability. I'm not going to lie, this is actually a really solid ability. I use this every single time I PvE, and I've been thinking about situations where it could be good in PvP, but considering how nerfed our instant cast healing is and us having to cast a lot more, I think Flash Flood's a lot better. But there was a lot of times last patch where I really didn't have to cast heals and I just had, I don't know. If you're fighting against something really roddy, you can try Downpour. I wouldn't really recommend it, but there was actually a couple games where I thought to myself, you know what, this would be a pretty nice ability to have, but I didn't end up using it. So Flash Flood's definitely going to be your go-to. I would say 99.99% of the time, unless you want to experiment with Downpour, it's up to you. Just gives you an extra 20% haste when you consume a Tidal Wave, so obviously very powerful. Right there, Flash Flood, it's going to work on your... Oh, I actually didn't even realize it works on your next Chain Heal. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So if you end up playing the Tidebringer, and then you want to use a cast of the Tidal Waves first for the Flash Flood, you can actually get really fast Chain Heals. I thought it was only Healing Wave and Healing Surge, because those are the heals that the Tidal Waves affect, but Flash Flood's definitely going to be really solid all around. And then lastly, Ascendance is definitely going to be your go-to. Let's see if I can do this. Ascendance is definitely going to be your go-to. Just super powerful. You know, you guys all know what it does. It duplicates your healing. Make sure that you recognize that Ascendance has a 20-yard range. So if you're about this far from someone, Ascendance will work. But if you're this far from someone, Ascendance will not work. 20 yards, give or take. One thing to know, that Ascendance will always heal yourself. Let me see if I could heal these mobs. Let me see if I could heal these mobs. Okay, I could heal these mobs. So one thing to notice is that Ascendance will always heal yourself. So if I'm this far away, Ascendance is going to heal me, as you can see. So the range for Ascendance on your own heals will... You'll never be out of range. So if you're really low and your teammate's really low and you're healing him for the full amount, that healing is being essentially duplicated on you, because no one else is in the radius, which actually gives you a ton of value of Ascendance. So if these were your 2 DPS, you're playing some melee cleave stuff, and you pop Ascendance, you're going to heal him for 25k, then you're going to heal yourself for 25k. So that's like a really crazy super value Ascendance, which will, instead of making your heals split into a third, because it's supposed to split evenly, it's making your heals split into a 50-50. If you ever notice, Ascendance actually feels really strong in 2v2 because your heals are only being divided by 2 people as opposed to 3 people. So make sure you respect the range on Ascendance, and make sure you also understand that the range will never be affected by your range. Like, you're always going to get the Ascendance heals no matter what. Wellspring is something that you're never going to take in PvP. I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think High Tide is just a meme. I'm not a big fan of the Chain Heal spec. If you're looking for the biggest Chain Heals of all time, and maybe in RBGs, High Tide could potentially be the play, but Ascendance just has way too much value. Way too much value in Arena. 3v3 Arena, that is. So moving on here, going to talk about the Trinkets. This is something that I kind of learned from experience. You know, a lot of people ask, Cdew, when do you play Adaptation? When do you play Relentless? It's such a very vague answer. Like, it's hard to say, but I'll do the best I can. Basically, versus Rogue Mage this expansion, I've never not played Trinket. It just feels like every time I play Relentless, I just get punished for it too hard. Although I do think Relentless is supposed to be good versus Outlaw, mainly because Outlaw blind is 1-5 as opposed to 2 minutes. And generally speaking, when you fight against Sub or Assassination, you most of the time want to line up your Trinket with their blind, most of the time. Adaptation, I believe, only against Hunters. And the reason behind that is because I'm an Orc. So if I'm playing against Hunters and I get Hodge, or I'm playing against Hunters and I get bashed, you know, Jungle or Ret Hunter, my Adaptation doesn't proc because I have the lower duration on my stuns, which means I will get out of every other trap, which means it's really powerful. And then if you're playing with a Demon Hunter, you can rotate that with Reverse Magic, and you get out of every single trap, which is obviously really crazy. And I also sometimes like when I'm playing against like FMP or something with a Demon Hunter on my team to play Adaptation, because every single full CC is really dangerous, but only when I have a Demon Hunter on my team, so to back me up with that Reverse Magic in case I ever screw up and get sheeped at a time where my Adapt shouldn't have procced because I have like an interrupt or something, I screw up. Relentless I play against sometimes. I I really like it for Shadow Priest, but it kind of depends on the situation. So Shadow Priest Rogue, I would play Trinket because there's a Rogue, but Shadow Priest Hunter, I'd play Relentless. Shadow Priest Fire Mage, I would probably play Relentless, things like that. Shadow Priests have a ton of CC, Fire Mage has a ton of CC. The big thing about Relentless versus Fire Mage is that they shouldn't have enough haste to DB Sheep you, which allows you to come out and shear the DB Sheep or the ground the DB Sheep, which is really important, but you can't use it versus Rogues, otherwise you'll just get kind of screwed by the blind. So just a general thought on how I decide to use these. Sometimes if I'm playing against like Hunter comps, I do like Relentless in general, but against Ret Hunter, with Ret having a big 2-minute burst, and even against Jungle, essentially, you know, Incarnate's just so scary. It's kind of hard to say. So I would just say, for the most part, try the talents out. If you play Trinket for something and you're like, oh man, I'm sitting so much CC, this is so brutal, try Relentless. And if you try Relentless and you're like, man, you know, we're winning the whole game, then they got that one CC chain where if I had a break, we would win, go back to Trinket, and so on and so forth. So I would say definitely experiment. So moving into the honor talents, Grounding Totem obviously only going to be good versus casters for the most part. Sometimes you could play a little aggressive and you can use Grounding Totem to maybe stop interrupts. Like, for example, if I play against Mistweaver Turbo, I kind of like Grounding because I could just, you know, plop a Grounding behind the pillar. Oh, my war mode's not on, so I can't use it. All right, let's just do a fake grounding here. Plop. And I could cast a Hex on the Shaman just to ground the Shear. So there's not any casters on the team, but for the most part, that Grounding Totem is getting me insane value because I could just relieve pressure at any time where I want because they have no decurse, so Hexing the Shaman's pretty powerful. So Grounding Totem, obviously a very powerful spell, so it's up to you. Counter-Strike, I wouldn't recommend ever using. Swelling Waves definitely has gained a lot more value since your casted heals are stronger, but I would say that if you're playing Swelling Waves, you're most likely in a situation where you're better off playing Spectral Recovery and Spirit Wolf and just getting the hell out of there. Voodoo Mastery, pretty good against stuff that doesn't have a decurse. Like I just said, Mistweaver Turbo. If you're fighting a Mistweaver Turbo and you're losing, just as a vague example, the only person that you could Hex is a damage dealer, or maybe even a reverse roll where the damage dealer doesn't have a decurse and the healer can get hexed. Voodoo Mastery is definitely going to get a lot of value, but you want to make sure you're playing a comp that's not very roddy. So, for example, I played DH Boomkin. You guys probably know that. It's really hard to Hex on CD because all the damage from the DH cleaves, all the damage from the Moonkin cleaves, so kind of hard to utilize. Electrocute, a lot worse in this expansion than the previous expansion. It does not much damage. It's something where it's like, you know, you have to tell yourself, man, I really don't have better honor talents to take here, so I'm just going to go for it. I keep using Mistweaver Turbo as an example. It's kind of a relevant comp, but if I was playing Windwalker DK, for example, I'd probably play versus Mistweaver Turbo, Grounding, Ancestral Gift, and Electrocute. Just throwing out that out there. So Electrocute, it's not much damage, but it's a little bit more damage to push over the edge. But if you're trying to do damage, make sure you prioritize Flame Shock over Electrocute, unless you're prioritizing Dispelling over damage, if that makes sense. Like, Flame Shock and Lava Burst are going to do more damage than Electrocute. So there's some times where it's just better to throw up a Flame Shock, then Purge, and if you get the Lava Burst proc, throw out the Lava Burst, and then continue purging. But yeah, Electrocute just doesn't do that much damage. Spirit Link Totem, I talked about a little bit earlier. This talent has been nerfed so many times. I'm not a fan of it all. If you're trying to play like a Mimi chain heal build where you're just getting the biggest chain heals ever, obviously 100% more healing on an ability that heals for a ton is going to be crazy. But keep in mind that it's a ton of mana, it has a cast time, you have to be within range of each other, and you lose out on Spirit Link Totem, aka bad. But if you're just trying to show off and be like, hey guys, look, I can chain heal for 150k, bzzz, you know, feel free to spec it. Tidebringer, definitely a real talent. Definitely a real talent. Chain heal heals for an absurd amount. Let's just go ahead and open the combat log here. So just right off the bat, chain healing, that healed for 18k. So I believe in Arena that is buffed by 50%. So let's go ahead and do a Unleash here, which increases it by 35%. That's 25k. So, you know, another 12,500 on that. And then that's healing multiple targets. And then if you get a crit and you have Sky Fury, that's another 20% on top of that. So the numbers can get really crazy really quick. Chain heal is definitely going to be a really effective way to top people, as well as the cast time being fairly quick with the jumps of Tidebringer. Also, in some strange way, it's actually like pretty solid buff protection. Protects your tidal waves, protects your riptides, and then also vice versa. So a lot of Restive Shamans are playing Tidebringer right now. I personally have played it, and I felt that it's unnecessary. personally. I just feel like Healing Wave and Healing Surge are more effective uses of mana. Chain Heal is really inefficient, in my opinion. Like, if any of you guys in here PvE, or if any of you guys watching PvE, you'll know that if you're spamming Chain Heal in PvE, you are going to run out of mana. It's how it works. Chain Heal is just so expensive. Not only that, but imagine you're in a raid situation where you're chain healing over and over again, and then guess what? You're going to throw out the flame shocks. You're going to throw out the purges. That's just going to make your mana evaporate. So that's one of the biggest reasons I'm not a big fan of chain heal. So if you're trying to do as much throughput as possible, and you're like, man, I'm really struggling to heal my team, I'm at full mana, play Tidebringer. Play the chain heal spec. I wouldn't really recommend Deluge. I also wouldn't recommend High Tide or Spirit Link, but Tidebringer in general with Unleash, you're going to get some big chain heals. It's definitely going to help you pump out healing. Spectral Recovery, I would only recommend if you're playing the Spirit Wolf spec, and it's like one of those like last resort things where it's like, man, this team is training me. I don't know how to get away. So the best thing you could do is just Ghost Wolf. You know, drop an Earthbind, try and have your teammates slow. Ghost Wolf, you can Unleash while in Ghost Wolf, which is a big heal. You know, you're running around. So you're definitely going to get a lot of value out of that. If you're playing Pack Spirit is nerfed by 80%. Still good. Still good. Pack Spirit, if you're in Ghost Wolf and you're playing Spirit Wolf and you're playing Spectral Recovery and you're in Ghost Wolf and you have like reasonably decent pieces, I have a 385, a 375, and a 345, I would say it's maybe a little bit above average. But this is low, this is average, and this is above average, so maybe it is average. You're probably going to be doing 6 to 7k HPS just doing this in Ghost Wolf while taking 20% damage reduction. So definitely still completely viable. I would recommend it. It obviously got nerfed, but it's still really, really good. So Cleansing Waters is probably one of the crazier talents they added this expansion. Or not this expansion, excuse me, this patch. And I've tested it, and I feel like when I played it, I feel like I'm force chain healing and I'm force healing raining, and it just feels really awkward. So I played against Shadow Priest Warlock and I used it, and it just felt like I didn't need it. You know, I would use my regular Dispel and I would just rotate Riptides on multiple people, and it didn't feel like I needed to chain heal. It didn't feel like I needed to healing rain. I played against like Boomkin Shadow Priest, and once again, you know, we kind of sat behind the pillar, and you know, there'd be healing rains down, and I would be dispelling dots, but it just didn't feel necessary. It's just the truth. It felt awkward. The only time so far in this patch where I felt like Cleansing Waters felt like really useful is when I'm fighting against mages. Okay, so this has been a little bit of a controversial topic. Some people believe it, some people don't. Cleansing Waters dispels CC. If you're in a polymorph, if you drop a healing rain and you get polymorphed and that healing rain crits, you dispel yourself. That is insane. That is, to me, that's the best way to utilize the talent from a 3v3 standpoint, is using against mages. You know, obviously as a shaman, you want to be positioned in a spot. You want to be positioned in a spot where you're kind of lining and stuff, so you can easily, let's just say mage is over here. Oh, that mage is doing stuff. You're going to do this. Healing rain down, you know? Hands up. Don't sheep. They get you in the sheep, healing rain has a chance to spell it. That's the best way to use the talent, in my opinion. Obviously in RBGs it's going to be a lot different. I don't really do RBGs, so Sky Fury, excellent for casters. You play with a Boomkin, that's going to get you big damage. Well-timed Sky Fury totems. You know, when Sam says he has Incarn, I say, okay, I have Sky Fury. Boom. 20% on those crits. It's also just good for healing in general. 20% more. Obviously, you have a huge chance to crit with Healing Surge. 40% plus what the base you have, and even more if you're playing Turn the Tide. So, let's just see. Of course, that didn't crit. Let's try another one here. Got about a 50% chance to crit. I'm feeling lucky on this next one. We could just do this. Let's see if this crits. Of course it didn't crit. Alright, one more try, one more try. One more try. Bang! 50k. So 20% of that 50k, extra 10,000 healing. Pretty solid. Pretty solid. So if you're just trying to get a little bit extra healing, you don't really want to electrocute for extra damage or things like that, Sky Fury is still going to be good in melee cleaves, essentially, is what I'm saying. There's still going to be value. So I would like to go over traits now. This has been a very popular question that I keep getting in chat. Yo, Cdew, what traits do I play? What traits do I play? Do you still play Surging Tides? Do you play Turn the Tides? Do you play the Chain Heal trait? And To me, there's 3 traits that seem viable. Obviously, there's going to be Surging Tides, which is still really good, but you're missing 1 charge of Riptide. But still really good. And then there's going to be the new Turn of the Tide, which is also really good. But it's a little more difficult to obtain, I believe. And also the percentage doesn't stack. So both bonuses of Tidal Waves are increased by 5%. That doesn't stack. You'll never get that above 5%. So essentially it's that 5% plus 1,200 or whatever piece of gear you have to Healing Surge and Healing Wave. And then lastly, there's the Chain Heal. Your Chain Heal heals its primary target for an additional 1,400 or whatever piece you have for how much it heals. So I'm going to say right off the bat, if you're playing the Chain Heal build, this might be pretty good. I personally don't play the Chain Heal build, so it's not something I've really experimented with. But if you're playing the Chain Heal build, you probably most likely don't want Turn of the Tide because you're not really going to be getting value out of your Tidal Waves because you're not really using them. Maybe the Chain Heal build is still better with Surging Tides, just in case people get low. It gives you more time to actually get those Chain Heals off. So definitely something that can be tested if you have that trait. I've tried some games with 1 Turn of the Tide and 1 Surging Tide with this gear right here. Surging Tides, Turn the Tide. And I've just been a little unimpressed by Turn of the Tides. So it feels like when I'm casting on Shaman, personally, stuff isn't dying. Like, it feels like my heals are good enough already. It doesn't feel like I need bonus healing on my Healing Surge. It doesn't feel like I need bonus healing on my Healing Wave. If I'm doing this in a game, people, their HP is going up. But there's always going to be those situations where someone does get low. And having that Riptide, you know, with that 21,000 shield, I believe it is. I think mine shields for 21k. It's really, really clutch. So although you're probably going to get more healing out of Turn the Tide, even if you're stacking it, it feels like Surging Tides is more useful in situations where you need it, if that makes sense. Like, it's more of an effective trait. Like, Turn of the Tides most likely is going to be more healing over the course of the game. If you do 10 Healing Surges, it's going to increase your healing by 10,000. And if you have 3, it's going to increase it by 30,000. As opposed to, you know, if you get 1 Surging Tides where someone's at 10k HP and they get an extra 20,000 shield, it's just like that. That to me is more valuable than having that extra healing throughout the course of the game. With that being said, next patch, I think no matter what, you want at least 1 piece with Turn of the Tide so you get that percentage increase. Obviously, in a perfect world, you want to make sure that you can get both Surging Tides and Turn of the Tides. I think those are the best traits that you can get. But I believe that, let me see here. This is the dream piece right here. So King Rastakhan from Battle of whatever the hell this thing is called. This is the piece that you want. Surging Tides, Turn of the Tides. This has both. So that covers exactly what we just talked about. You can go for triple Surging Tides, but you have that 1 Turn of the Tides for the increased percentage of your Tidal Waves. There might be more pieces like this, but this is the only one that I've seen. I think the other piece might be either from the other pieces, if it exists, is either going to be from PvP or the vendor. So yeah, oh yeah, this piece also has Pack Spirit. So just basically the dream piece, all right? This is the dream piece. You definitely want this. You should be farming this. It doesn't matter what level you get it at. You could do it LFR, normal, heroic, mythic. This is the piece of gear that you want as far as I'm concerned. So Turn of the Tides and Surging Tides, in my opinion, are definitely the best, but I think Surging Tides just rules right now, so I'm still using triple Surging Tides at the moment. It just feels better for me. The stat priority that I want to talk about, this is what I used before 8.1, has been Verse Mastery. So Verse Mastery, to me, were the best stats. I played a lot on TR, I went Haste, I went Crit, and it just doesn't feel like those stats had as much value. So the first thing that I noticed when I played a lot of Haste is that when I had to cast, even though my casts were quicker, it just felt like I had to cast more and I was ooming faster. Like, I would get cast off, but they didn't feel as effective as opposed to the Mastery, where maybe my casts were slower, but me getting those heals off actually made them feel more effective, as well as the Earth Shield healing, the Riptide healing, the Healing Stream healing. All that healing adds up so much. So even in this patch where it feels like you have to cast more, I don't think I'm valuing Haste as much as I am just raw healing. I want my heals to actually do healing. So I'm still saying versatility as your main stat. It increases your damage, it increases your healing, increases your damage reduction. By far, the best stat. You want as much versatility as possible. So, with that being said, I'm still saying that I think Mastery is a good backup. But if you want to try Haste, I think Haste is good. And if you feel like you are using a lot of Cleansing Waters, you could even go Crit to make sure that has a higher chance to proc. But I think Verse Mastery is still the play. So let's just go over your healing spells as a Resto Shaman very quickly. So first thing, obviously you have Healing Surge. You have Healing Wave. These are your main casted heals. You have Chain Heal, which you will never use in PvP unless you're actually spec'd into Tidebringer, but there's not really too much to talk about that. It's just if you want to use the Chain Heal, you can. Basically, Healing Surge is going to be your fast, more inefficient, higher throughput spell. So if I want to do as much healing as possible, and I feel like we're in a situation where we're behind, I use Healing Surge. It's a little bit of a faster cast time, not by much, especially not with the new Turn the Tides. So 1.9 to 1.1, that's without thing. This is one. Oh, sorry, let me get rid of this. It's like a 0.3 difference, I believe. So 1.4 to 1.6, 0.2 difference. With Turn the Tides, it actually closes the gap a little bit, but that 0.2 seconds could matter quite a bit. And also, the higher percentage chance to crit on Tidal Waves is really good. So Healing Surge, your more inefficient, higher throughput ability, although Healing Wave does heal for more than Healing Surge, it's not by much. I think it might be changed a little bit in PvP. I think Healing Surge might be buffed by 15, and Healing Wave might be buffed by 25, so it closes that gap a little bit. Actually, it spreads the gap out a little bit more. Healing Surge is still better for raw healing throughput. If you need the healing throughput, use Healing Surge, especially when you have Sky Fury Totem. If you have Sky Fury Totem, that 20% increased critical is going to go a long way for Healing Surge. So, Healing Surge, faster, more inefficient. Healing Wave, slower, more efficient. So if you're looking to save mana, if you're looking for a longer game, you want to use as many healing waves as possible. If you're looking to do as much healing throughput as possible, and you kind of feel like you're far behind, you want to make sure you use the Healing Surge. With that being said, you want to make sure that you always have Earth Shield up on your main target. By that, I mean the person that's taking kind of the brunt of the damage. They get healed by the Earth Shield, and they also get the healing increased. You want to make sure that you're using Unleash Life on cooldown. This ability is clutch. Every 15 seconds, you need to get in the habit of pressing Unleash Life. Riptide, you want to try and spread on as many targets as possible versus rot damage, versus single target damage. You want to always have on your main target, but for the most part, you want to be a little careful. So basically what I'm talking about is if you're playing triple Surging Tides like me, if someone's lingering around the 60 to 70 and they already have the Riptide buff, you might want to wait to see if they dip below that 50 to get the extra benefit of the Surging Tide. So essentially, you want to use Riptide on cooldown, but you want to try and get a little bit extra value if you want to get a little bit extra value if you feel like you can when they're going to dip below the 50% there. So yeah. Someone in my chat actually said enchants. I forgot about that. Coastal Surge, definitely the enchant that I went with this entire expansion. We could just do a quick look over some of the games I played here. Coastal Surge, 5.9% of my healing. That is solid. Another game here, Coastal Surge, 5.7% of my healing. It just has such a great 20% of my healing. That's an irrelevant game. I'm just trolling. It just has such a great percentage. 7.6% of my healing. It's phenomenal. Definitely recommend Coastal Surge for all those people out here that aren't playing it. That's kind of a lower game, 2%, 5.9%. Yeah, Coastal Surge, definitely the play. And then obviously we talked about versatility being the best, so versatility on the rings are going to be it. And I think that's it for enchants. So once again, going into your healing spells, Healing Stream is one of those ones that you just kind of want to press on cooldown. Healing Tide is actually a really, really bad ability. I generally use Healing Tide almost immediately at the start of the game where I feel like there's any type of spread pressure or any type of heavy single target damage. From what I understand, Healing Stream literally heals for more than Healing Tide. Healing Tide is just bad. Healing Stream was healing for 3,800. Healing Tide heals for 3k. Healing Tide is bad. So don't hold on to Healing Tide like it's a saving grace. Healing Tide hasn't been good since MOP. So I generally just throw it out pretty early. Just get it on CD almost as quickly as possible. Just so you can use it more frequently. And what else do we have in terms of healing here? Healing Rain you don't really ever want to use unless, like, Rogue Mage is in stealth and you drop a Healing Rain. There's some times where if my teammate's in a Cyclone and I feel like need to kind of avoid CC and I'm not sure what to do, I'll drop like a healing rain on him so he has immediate healing when he gets out of a cyclone, or if someone's in a smoke bomb, you know, this guy got bombed here, you can drop a healing rain just for some sorts of healing. Generally speaking, without cleansing waters, it's not really going to have any effect. And then what else we got here? Is that it in terms of healing spells? Just kind of want to touch up briefly on those. I think that's it. So I talked a little bit about how I use Healing Tide. I feel like in previous expansions, for the most part, there was kind of like a script on how I used my cooldowns. I feel like that is still kind of true, but not necessarily as true. For example, versus Druids, Feral, and Boomkin, I like to link up my Ascendants with their Incarn. It's just a 3-minute cooldown where they do a ton of damage. This is a 3-minute cooldown where I do a ton of healing. With that being said, Ancestral Gift is new. I really like the Arm Mastery with Ascendants to make sure I can get it off. So generally speaking with Ascendants, you can either do it two ways. You can use Unleash first and then Ascend, and then Arm Mastery halfway through. Or you could Ascend first and then Unleash, so you get the extra bonus healing from the Unleash, because the Unleash actually does a lot of healing. But then you give them the extra global to recognize it's Unleashed to try and interrupt you or CC you or something like that. So it's kind of personal preference on that. And then you just use the Arm Mastery mid-cast, try and bait interrupts with the Spirit Walkers. And then Earthern is obviously probably going to be your most frequent used cooldown. Earthern, you know, it might seem like something so small, but it can win or lose games. The way you use Earthern, it's going to sound really silly here, but you can use it preemptively, or you can use it proactively or reactively. So what I mean by that is, like, you're fighting against a turbo, you know, you see Colossus Smash go up, you see Sharpen go up, you just boom, Earthern. All right. Other than that, it's like, you know, you could be fighting Rogue Mage and you're like, man, I have no trinket, you have no trinket, you know, this rogue's moving close to me, boom, I'm going to drop an Earthern. So Earthern, you know, a lot of the games, if you're trying to improve on Resto Shaman, try and figure out if you feel like your Eartherns are good or not. I was playing a few games with Shadow Priest today, and it's like, so you're fighting against a cleave, and you have a Shadow Priest, you feel like your Shadow Priest is getting crushed, drop an Earthern. Then after that, he can fade. And then after that, he can disperse. And after that, you have Earthen again. And then after that, you can fade again. And, you know, you kind of want to get in this this infinite rotation of, like, having defensive cooldowns, right? So Earthern's obviously really good. Spirit Link is just something that you can't script Spirit Link. I can't say, you use Spirit Link every single time, you know, that happens. I can say, use Spirit Link every single time you think someone's going to die. You know, obviously, Spirit Link is just, it's a lifesaver. So Spirit Link has no script. You just got to use it when you feel like people are going to die. And then if you're fighting something that's kind of off script with Ascendants, you got to use that when you just need just a lot of extra healing. Someone had an interesting question a few days ago where they said, how do you use Ascendants if it's only single target damage? Ascendants, it's not only good for AoE, it's still good for single target damage. If there's just one person taking damage on your team, Ascendants is a 33% healing increase depending on positioning. So, you know, if these are your teammates and you pop Ascendants right here, you're healing for 33% more. That is a huge percentage of healing. So if you have a teammate, just once again, for example, fighting Turbo, just getting smashed by Turbo, your Ascendants is going to make them heal for 33% more. So you got to think of it like that. If you have a Shadow Priest and this teammate decides to move over here, and then you pop Ascendants, like I talked about earlier with the range, he's out of range, now your Ascendants is healing for 50% more. So it's still really good for single target healing. So just kind of think of it that it's not only good for AoE, it's just, it duplicates your healing. So obviously if there's 3 people, it increases your healing by a third on that one person. So in terms of cooldowns, I like to, I'm pretty loose with my Arm Mastery. You know, if I need to deal with an interrupt at a bad time, I'll use it. I won't always save it for Ascendants. In terms of wall, I just kind of use it when I feel like I'm going to take damage. It's really good versus cooldowns like Incarn, Vendetta. You know, if Warriors sharpen up and you feel like you can't heal through the damage, things like that. It's just abilities that there's not a huge emphasis on it. You know what I mean? There's not a huge emphasis on it. Last expansion, I always wanted to Astral Shift every single Vendetta, but it doesn't really feel like that's as important anymore as it is this expansion, especially since Vendetta's 2 minutes and not the 1.5 or the 1. Whatever it was last patch or last expansion. So cooldown rotation is a little bit funky this expansion, and I kind of like it. I kind of like the free, like, loose healing style where it doesn't feel like, you know, oh, they did this, I do that. I kind of like the free-flowing gameplay where it feels like I don't need to be a robot, where it's like Incarnation will respond with Ascendance. You know, it's like that gameplay is not very fun for me personally. So someone wanted me to talk about like the oh shit moments. You know, what's going to be the best globals. You know, sometimes I play with Sam on Resto Shaman and he'll use an ability and I'll be like, oh, you know, this ability was better. So the global cooldowns that you can press coming out of CC, that's probably like what the most like, you know, what can I do oh shit button is obviously going to be Spirit Link. Without any questions asked, what is going to save you global per global the quickest? Spirit Link. That is just the God-given truth, okay? But obviously that's not always going to be there. So the second best global you can press coming out of CC if someone is below 50% is Riptide if you have triple Surging Tides. If you have double, I need to think about this for a second. Let me do some quick math in my head. If you have triple Surging Tides will be better than any other global to press, at least at 385. So at 385, it's 21,000 below 50%. So 21,000 plus Riptide, which is increased by mastery. So that's going to be better. If you're at 345, you might need to do the math on this. If you have all like 340 or 345, there's a chance that Unleash is a better global. It's probably still Riptide, but yeah. So coming out of CC, Riptide is the best global you can press. If you're playing Echo, Riptide once again is going to be the best global you can press, I think. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. If the shield still holds from the initial Riptide, the next best global you can press is Unleash. But if the shield gets broken, then it's Riptide, because the shield doesn't extend or reapply, I guess, if that makes sense. So you want the shield to go away from the Riptide, from the Surging Tides, before you actually use the next Riptide. But yeah, so the best global you can press out of CC or interrupts or whatever and someone's below 50 is going to be Riptide, followed by Unleash. If you feel like they're safe, like, so you use a Riptide and you feel like they're safe, they got the shield, you can go for the Earth Shield global if you kind of feel that. That way you get an extra 10% on your Unleash that you're going to use next. And then most likely you will have a Riptide off that, and then you can Riptide again if they're still below 50%. And then also there's Earthen. So if someone's really low, I would recommend, like, someone's in desperate need of help, they're just getting absolutely trucked, I would Riptide into Unleash, into Earthen, into Riptide. Those would be my go-to globals, and then after that I would Earth Shield and try and fake a couple heals or arm mastery, something like that. So yeah, those would be kind of like my oh shit, you know, what do I do buttons here. Riptide with Surging Tide is just so powerful. Unleash is insane instant heal. A lot of people might think Earthen's the go-to. You know, there's been times where I play with Sam and he comes out of CC and he presses Earthen and I barely die. And it's like, well, that Earthen absorbed, you know, maybe like 6k damage, but if you press Riptide on me, it would absorb, yeah, I would have got an 8k heal with a 20k shield, right? So that's just going to be more effective. In this expansion, Resto Shamans have been very, very tanky, and one of the big reasons behind that is Pack Spirit. So I have a set with triple Pack Spirit, where I actually sacrifice my item level. So instead of using 385 Surging Tides, I have a 345 Surging Tides, a 375 Surging Tides, and this one stays the same, but these have Pack Spirit. So Pack Spirit in this expansion is how you deal with melee the best. It recently got nerfed by 80%. Well, it was actually already nerfed by 50, so it got nerfed to 80. Didn't get nerfed another 80% on top of that. But it's still very, very good in conjunction with Spirit Wolf and in conjunction with Spectral Recovery. So it's very simple. You go in Ghost Wolf. You use Unleash while you're in Ghost Wolf. You can press it while you're in Ghost Wolf. It's just a huge heal. Doesn't take you out of Ghost Wolf. And when you drop below 50%, depending on if the team you're playing against has stuns or not, you Riptide, you get your Surging Tides back up, and then you go back and Ghost Wolf. It's really simple. You obviously run around as fast as you can. You try and get your DPS to slow melee off you. You just kind of get out of line. You know, if these guys are chasing you, you drop an Earthbind, get away. It's really simple. If you don't have Pack Spirit, it's going to be a lot more complicated. If you don't have Pack Spirit, I'm not even sure it's worth playing Spirit Wolf. If you have no Pack Spirit, if you have 2, it's definitely worth it. If you have 1, it might not be worth it. It's up to you. I'm not 100% sure. But, so let's just say, you know, that's the best way to deal with melee, by far. You know, if you're dying to melee every single game, try and farm those traits best you can. But if you don't have those, it's obviously just going to be about earth grabbing. You want to try and pull melee, like, behind pillars so they can't get dispelled by their healer or whatever. And then use earth grab first. And the way I kind of like recommend it, this is a little different than the last expansion, is you want to use Earth Grab first, and then you want to try and get distance, and then most likely you're going to force gap closers. If you're still taking a ton of damage after that Earth Grab was used, you want to drop the Earthern. And then after the Earthern's down, you know, hopefully you have the Earth Grab back up once again to try and once again get more and more distance. But Resto Shamans have been fairly good at getting away. Just keep in mind that, you know, you cannot be slowed in Ghost Wolf. So your best asset is having them slowed and then you running at normal speed. That's what the beauty of Ghost Wolf is. So just try and slow them as much as you can with your Earthbinds, your Earth Grabs. Try and have your teammates slow them, and just always try and get out there, but get out of there. But Earth Grab and Earthern into second Earth Grab, you're most likely going to get some distance. If they reconnect after that, you're obviously going to maybe have to use some cooldowns. It could be wall. It could be wall prior to that, but it could be wall. It could be the R Mastery. But running around pillars has always been Shaman's like biggest ally. You might not think like pillars are very good for surviving against melee. Like, it might not be a concept that you're grasping. You're like, how are pillars going to help me versus melee? They don't cast spells. But if you Earth Grab a warrior here and then you're here, he can't charge you. But if you Earth Grab him here and you're like, yo, I'm just going to run in a straight line, and he gets dispelled, bang, he charges you, he's going to be back on you. You know, Rogue's going to shadow step you. So getting out of line of sight to prevent those gap closers is very, very important. Also dropping the Earth Grab behind the pillar is also really important, so they can't get this spell. And you want to force stuff like Cloak of Shadows, Vanish, Blaze Storm. What other ones we got here? Maybe Freedoms from Paladins, Ret Paladins. Some other tools to kind of get out of those routes. So, and then Shaman have notoriously been very good at dealing with casters. So how to deal with casters? It's really simple. It's really simple. Grounding Totem, Wind Shear, Hex, and Positioning are going to be your biggest allies. When you're fighting against casters, you always want to play in a... I say always, but it kind of depends on your win condition. If you're trying to play defensively and you're trying to avoid CC versus casters, you always want to play in defensive positioning. And you never want to get boxed out. So what I call this is playing closest wizard. So let's just say you're playing against a team and, you know, you have a Destro Warlock back there. You have a Fire Mage right here. And you're playing right here. If your teammates are all the way out there and they're like, yo, I'm destroying this Warlock, you know, this Warlock's getting destroyed, and you're like, yo, I'm trying to heal you, but this guy right here is sheeping me, you know? You got to play closest wizard. What that means is your DPS got to come back, they got to attack the mage, they got to get pressure on him so you could once again continue to be in a spot. So that's something that you got to get comfortable with your DPS saying like, yo, this guy's too close to me, he's putting me in a bad position, it's really easy for him to CC me. You play closest wizard, and then whoever pushes in the furthest, your DPS attack that guy, and you kind of play a longer game. But the tools you have is just, you know, you have grounding to stop CC, you have wind shear to stop CC. If you're fighting against mages and you wind shear Poly, you can immediately cast a Hex on Poly on the mage, because Polymorph is on the Arcane tree, which means they can't cast Polymorph if you lock them, or excuse me, they can't cast Counterspell if you lock them on Polymorph, which means you get a free Hex on them. So if there's no decurse on the team, that means they're going to sit in that Hex. Notoriously being really good against RMP because Priest can't decurse. So if you shear Poly, you should always almost immediately go for a Hex on Mage, especially versus teams that don't have decurse. That's really, really good. And then just, it's all about positioning. So it's like, if I'm fighting against a Mage right now and I'm positioned right here and I peek out and I see him casting a Poly, I'll sit in this corner and I'll spam shear. So if he blinks, you shear the Poly. Like, you spam focus shear when someone's not in your line of sight. So it's like, you know, I come out, I riptide this guy, Mage is casting Polymorph, I stand here, I spam shear, he blinks into my shear, you don't get sheeped. It's really easy, and you're also not wasting your shear, because if he doesn't blink, you don't use your shear because you're out of line of sight. So that's something I do against mages all the time when they try and go for those cheeky blink plays. And then also, if you kind of notice it and you don't have shear, you can go for the grounding as well. You just drop the grounding back here. Grounds it, and then you could also try and use caps. Like, if you have no interrupts, it's like, okay, I use my shear, I just dropped a Hex on this guy, so it's like, boom, I wind shear this guy, I cast a Hex on this guy. Sometimes I immediately drop a cap on that person. If he trinkets the Hex, he can get capped. Or if I do the same thing where I don't have shear, I go behind the pillar, I could drop a cap right here. Sometimes they blink into the cap. So this is just all stuff that you can use to kind of like disrupt casters. Obviously, you have Tremor Totem against Warlocks. When I say against casters, you know, it's like the Elemental Shamans, the Boomkins, the Mages, the Warlocks. Your biggest tool against Boomkin is generally just Earthern. So like, versus Boomkins, you want to play really far away. And if you see them kind of like inching towards you, it's just, you know, they're like, yo, I want a root beam, I want a root beam, I want a root beam. You walk out with an Earthen Totem. You try and soak the root beam with the Earthen Totem down on your DPS. You sit the root beam. Most likely, they're gonna be good in that situation. So all these tools, you know, Wind Shear, Grounding Totem, Capacitor Totem, Hex, are all tools you can use to just prevent casters, and obviously Tremor Totem. Sometimes when I'm fighting against Warlocks and I see them casting a fear on me, you know, I'm fighting against Warlock Mage, Tremor the Fear. Don't shear it, you know, because then he can cast Chaos Bolt, then he can cast Sheep. Eat the fear, let the Tremor go down, take the DR, put yourself in a situation where you can stop more stuff. So it's just using the Resto Shaman toolkit to the highest of abilities is something that's really difficult, but know that positioning is so prime in this Resto Shaman toolkit. If I stand in the middle of the map like this, you know, I Wind Shear this poly, I Hex this poly, I ground this poly, I'm going to get sheeped. I'm out of stuff. So whenever I'm in a situation where I'm trying to play really careful, if there's a mage here and my teammates are being aggressive and they're like, yo, Cdew, like, we're going to get a kill, we're going to get a kill. Obviously, you know, I talked about playing closest wizard. I'll be like, okay, do I have shear? Yes. Do I have ground? Yes. Okay, I'm free to kind of make this push. You know, mage going for a poly, boom, Wind Shear him right there. If he fakes it, boom, grounding right here. And then, you know, we kind of safely cross the map. So you should never try and cross, like, map versus casters without Wind Shear and without grounding. Otherwise, you're going to get screwed. You know, if you use the Wind Shear in the ground, then you try and cross, you're just going to get stuck in a free sheep. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit is about trinkets. So a lot of people always question my trinkets. There's obviously a lot of good trinkets in the game right now. Generally, if you're a PvPer, you have the option between the Battle Master, you have the option between the Intellect on use Verse, and you have the option between the Verse on use Intellect. The trinkets that I've found to be the best in this patch have been and are continuing to still be the two trinkets that I feel like do the most healing. On-demand healing. Very easy to use. Number one, Revitalizing Voodoo Totem. You can use it while you're interrupted on your heals. You can use it while you're in a silence. And all around, it just does a ton of healing. It's about 30k plus on average, even at 355 item level. So if you get root beamed versus a druid, you press it, and it's just doing spam healing. You see all this? Touch of the Voodoo. That's all healing. That's just bang, 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 bang. Another thing to know about Touch of the Voodoo is you can use it while you're in Hex. Ironically, I don't know. You get Hex, you can use it. So it's just free healing in that regard. The way I see it is that this trinket right here increases your versatility by 863, which is exactly 10% healing. For you to do 30k healing with an increase of 10%, you would have to do 300,000 healing, which seems really difficult to do. So if I had this trinket equipped and I use my on use, I would need to do it. I need to do 300,000 healing to get 30,000 healing out of this medallion with a 10% healing increase, which seems way harder to do in a short span. Like, how long does this take? Like 8 seconds or something, you know? And then obviously inoculating is like crazy. I come out of CC, I press inoculating, I Riptide, inoculating 7k. It's almost doubling the healing of my Riptide. I press unleash, another 7k. I press another Riptide, another 7k. It's just so much on-demand healing. With it being the new patch, though, obviously, there's new trinkets coming out. The tank trinket, most notoriously known as Val 6 Veiled Eye, or whatever it's called. Val 6, let me see here. Class, Warrior, this thing. Zal 6, okay? There's going to be a PvP trinket that essentially mimics what this trinket does next patch. That's probably going to be a go-to for all healers, especially if you think you're going to be trained. If you don't think you're going to be trained and you feel like you don't need the extra survivability as Resto Shaman, there's some really, really new great trinkets in this raid, which I think are really powerful. Let me see here. There's one that's just obviously insane. This is going to be the best trinket, by the way, in my opinion. Restores 66,000 health to a target, but inflict a curse on yourself that absorbs the next 19,000 healing. So, number one, cursed might be dispellable. Number two, it's essentially Bobble 2.0 if you guys played in Wrath of the Lich King. It's the same thing as Revitalizing Voodoo Totem's doing, except it's instant. It's just on-demand burst healing. Oh my god, I got sheared, you're going to die. Boom, 66,000 heal. You don't care if it absorbs healing on yourself. Most of the time, it's not even going to be on yourself. So that Trinket's obviously going to be really good. There's some other interesting Trinkets that you might use in offensive comps. I call it the Necrotic Trinket. It does damage and absorbs healing. Necrotic Strike absorbs healing. That's why I call it the Necrotic Trinket. You might end up using that, especially as like Windwalker DK or TSG or something where you're rushing people down. You all just use that at the same time. Does a ton of damage, absorbs a ton of healing, puts healers in a position where they can't really survive. So any type of Trinket you see like this is always going to be really good. Inoculating and Revitalizing are probably going to fall off from the item level. Like, I don't think it's going to be worth using 385 compared to 415s. I think that's just too big of a gap. Especially like knowing that this is healing for like 30-ish K and this is going to be healing for close to 70K. It's essentially doubled. So if you have this Trinket, you're going to be insane. The Tank Trinket's going to be really good. There's another Trinket that's similar to that, but I don't think it's as good. This is it, but I don't think this is as good. Envelop up to 5 allies in the targeted area and shared shields for 10 seconds, preventing up to 57,000 damage. Damage prevented is increased by person affected. So this is obviously, you know, something similar. It's just an on-use shield everyone type thing. This actually is kind of better in some situations. If you're all stacked up, you can ward everyone. These are the Trinkets I think are going to be really good out of the new raid. Worth probably doing like LFR and things like that. What is LFR at? Maybe LFR is not worth it, depending on what it is. LFR is 370. Probably not worth it. Normal is 385, so that's as good as Mythic in the last tier, so I wouldn't use that. Heroic, on the other hand, 400. Probably getting to the point where I want to start using it. Heroic probably isn't too hard to farm, especially since they're not really that late in the dungeon. But yeah. So the few things I talked about with how to deal with casters are also going to be your strongest utility for Shaman. The Wind Shear, the Grounding, the Tremor, the Hex, the Capacitor Totem, all things that you just kind of want to use in conjunction to preventing people from CCing you or preventing people from, you know, casting heals, you know, moving. It's just that is the rest of Shaman Toolkit in a nutshell, just using those effectively. Try and do your best to work on that. And your role as a Resto Shaman is you have two roles. You have the really defensive, stable healer role where you're playing, you know, kind of back here. You're avoiding CC. You're doing everything you can to prevent your DPS from being CC'd. And then you have the really offensive role where you're going to be running in. You're playing Electrocute. You're going for purges. You're shearing stuff. You're tanking CC because you don't really care. So Shaman has... It's kind of like polar opposites. It's got probably one of the most defensive playstyles in the game and one of the most offensive playstyles in the game. You know, Flame Shock does a ton of damage. Lava Burst, if you get those instant procs, can do, you know, upwards of like 13k. So your role as a Resto Shaman really kind of depends on the comp that you're playing. For example, as DH Boomkin, I have a really passive playstyle in some matches and a really aggressive playstyle in other matches. You know, when we play Resto Druids, I'm purging, I'm shearing, I'm in their face, I'm trying to, you know, do as much damage as possible. Then when we play against other things like RMP, I don't really have that option. You know, I'm just kind of staying back, trying to avoid CC, trying to make it really difficult for, you know, my teammates to die. So Resto Shaman is all about kind of identifying, you know, when should you be offensive, when you should be defensive. I would just say, you know, depending on what comp you're playing and how you're playing it, is just kind of have a general game plan of, do you guys want to play aggressive? Do you guys want to play defensive? You know, do you win a long game? Do you need to win a fast game? Just try and figure it out. It sounds a lot more difficult than it is. You know, just if you're playing a comp and you lose in a long game, try and play more aggressive. If you're playing a comp and you play too aggressive, try and win in a longer game. You know, it's just kind of process of elimination. This is how I learn all my stuff. I just, you know, every single expansion, every single patch, I'm not just equipped with infinite knowledge. You know, I've lost plenty of games on 8.1 just trying to figure out what was the best talents to play, how was the best way to play it. So, yeah. The comps that I've obviously found to be best on Resto Shaman is DH Boomkin. DH Boomkin is just such a smooth comp. It's so well-rounded offensively, defensively, probably the best comp in the game. But in general, Resto Shamans have always been really good with hybrids. So I would say, like, almost any Boomkin Shaman comp is going to be good. Warrior, DH, Death Knight, Assassination Rogue, Shadow Priest, even Warlock now, maybe even Elemental Shaman. You know, you have a ton of options with Shaman Boomkin. You have a ton of options with Shadow Priest Shaman. You know, same thing. Warrior, Rogue, Demon Hunter, Boomkin, Elemental Shaman. You know, maybe even Mage at this point. Almost any melee melee Shadow Priest, almost any melee Boomkin are going to be really good comps. I think Windwalker DK is going to be good good once again. So Shamans are going to be really good at healing those melee cleaves. I think DH Windwalker. I think TSG. Shaman doesn't really have good synergy with Rogue Mage or, Jungle, for example, but there's just so many comps that you're going to be able to play with Resto Shaman this expansion, or excuse me, this patch. I keep screwing that up. I apologize, but just understand that if you're used to last patch, you're going to have to cast a lot more. You just got to get in the habit of it. Start trying to fake those interrupts again. Try and put yourself in position where if you get interrupted, it's not going to be the end of the world. But that is actually going to conclude the 8-point run Resto Shaman guide. I hope I was able to answer all your questions. And if not, you guys know where to find me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.